Hey everyone, it's time for another episode of Rant and Wade, the podcast that nobody asked for and even fewer people listen to. Does that bother me? No, actually it doesn't. I don't really care. I'm trying to figure this out anyway, and there's a lot of hate crimes in all these podcasts, so it's probably best no one listens. Just joking, no hate crimes. It's just me talking. I like to just talk about stuff, and a lot of times you do a podcast and, you get guests and all this other fancy, sets. No, I will fix the background here. Going to be putting some AI photos up here if you are watching the video of this on YouTube. If you're just listening to me online, or as I said, I don't think anyone is or has. So that's pretty good. Low-hanging fruit is what I call it. Is that lots of fruit coming low-hanging? Let's get into fruit, huh? I'm not actually going to talk about fruit. I'm going to talk about food and 3.0. That's what I'm going to talk about. Well, I have the Canadian cure-all of ginger ale. I've injured myself at the gym doing stomach exercises. I do 300 stomach exercises to start the day. At my age, and it turns out if you take a few days off and then get back into it, you can pull the muscle, and it feels like cancer. I don't know what cancer feels like. But when you smoked a J and you're sitting there going, "There must be cancer, man!" instead of what it really is a partial hernia. Food, huh? We'll get into food. I grew up on a farm, and so I have different thoughts when it comes to food. And different. Here's the thing, folks. With farmers, I always get told, never tell your farm stories. They're so horrible. They always say it in that voice, too, which is really weird. But farm stories, because if you got a bunch of farm stories and farmers sitting around, we will tell stories to each other, and people who are not on a farm are horrified because that's what happens around food and animals. There's lots of death and lots of freaky crap and lots of things that come with slaughtering animals. I will say, though, that, for the most part, and of course, you may not believe it, but farmers are the biggest animal lovers of all. Like we are. Like, literally, we have to take care of these animals and kill it. So you can get fat. So you can go, farmers, they don't have... No, we literally feel bad when we have to kill things. Especially if you get to know them, you get to look in their eyes. Over time, you can build up a thick skin, which makes it easier. But I think a lot of it, like food, man, and we're getting into a lot of it now, but there's such waste when it comes to food. Such waste. If you think about, too, and just the amount of land that's going on, I want to get into it just now because the big thing to me that's really wrong is that we live in a society where we have both chronic obesity and chronic hunger. There are 670 million people worldwide that are what they call as chronically obese. 670 million. There's 690 people worldwide that are what we define as persistent and chronic hunger. Wow, it's almost the same number, isn't it? There's a same amount of people that are eating way too much, and there's a lot of people that are not eating enough. If you look at it, the way that people are just getting fat, I've noticed it quite a bit. I've lost weight. I'm a 27-inch waist. Oh, aren't you skinny? But no, I don't eat a lot. Food is not, it's not a problem. I've always said that I could be happy just taking a pill. I do enjoy food, but damn you, COVID, I can't taste anything anymore. So at this point, give me the pill, call it MDMA, whatever. When it comes down to the amount that people eat, and I think it's not only portion size that we're starting to see, it's the quality of it all. And one of the big things you notice, I live in Britain, when you look at food in America, and when I go back to Canada, there's so much crap in food. And I failed to realize this. When I first want to go back to North America, I'd fly there, and I noticed I'd get really full right away. And then you realize it's because when you lived on a European diet or a British diet, that there's not as many additives and things. We don't have as many sugars and starches and things like that. So when you eat it, you actually started to feel full. And then you start looking, when I'm back in North America, the portion sizes, but then it just came down to, just the quality of it. And it also seems, because food is obviously, the cost of living crisis we've just had, we've seen food prices raise incredibly. I would also say that food prices for me, compared to in Canada, where I've watched inflation just gouge the crap out of people, food prices are about 3 times higher in Canada than they are in the UK. I mean, I can get a loaf of bread still for 50p, eggs for £1. So the relative cost to it, which didn't make sense to me because Canada should be making their own food. Why aren't you making your own food? Why is everything so expensive in Canada? And I'll get into that in another episode. It's Canada. The key is no competition. It's a monopoly. We also have to look at, too, when you start looking at, the quality of the food, because one of the problems that I have, and I grew up in a smaller farm, obviously, but is what we've seen is the growth of mass farming. And the growth of mass farming is scary, because I've seen some of these farms that come around. You have, again, a mass farm, and we would have a few built up in our area, mostly pigs. The smell that comes with it, the effluent that goes in towards the water, it's not the same when it comes down to a footprint of farming where, the cows crap. And, if you've got like 200 cows on your farm and they're like crapping around the creeks and the rivers, it's not going to have the same effect as if you're sluicing out the crap from 6,000 pigs into a river, or a pond. Not to mention all the additives that they give these animals to make them bigger, more violent. I mean, when you look at that 70% of, 70% of the land in the world is for industrial agriculture, pretty much. And 70% of agricultural land is for livestock. Which, one of the things that happened when I was on my farm is we started getting into what we call bespoke farming. We weren't selling spokes or bespokes. But what happened is a lot of my friends that were farmers realized it's like, you know what? I don't like mass farming. It's not good for me. And also that there are massive corporations, Monsanto and places like that, sue you if your seeds get into your land. Oh, you got our seeds. We're going to sue you to make sure you're always using our seeds. Horrible companies. But these were big bully companies that would come in and basically say, we're going to put our farms here. They would try to do really dirty tactics to a lot of the farms around our area. So a lot of bespoke farming, a lot of my friends were like, you know what? People would like to buy a whole cow, and that's what some of my friends would do. It's like, why wouldn't you, you get a whole cow. So they just let the cow graze, cut it up at the end, and then you buy a whole cow, you get a whole cow for your freezer. It's more the idea being that, you get the one cow, what the cow's been eating, you can see the diet. And it's a lot easier, I think, than a lot of the mass farming. It used to be, they'd say that the average McDonald's hamburger, I think about 30 years ago, was made of 100,000 cows. Now it's something like 10 million. As opposed to a burger just being made from one cow. Fancy that. Craziness. So the mass farming that we'd also see, particularly that is really bad, is, and I don't think there's no government stepping up to do anything. A lot of these are multinational companies that come in, they basically say, well, we're food, so we're essential. And I think a lot of times, a lot of the governments don't really step up and do anything. One of the weird things I always see in North America too, which isn't as prevalent in the UK, is that there's always these product recalls. We don't have as many product recalls in Europe as you have in North America. Whatever's happened to your romaine lettuce, I don't know if someone is literally just defecating right on lettuce and go, here you go. Because there's so many product recalls that you guys have. So what worries about me is this sort of diversity. There's not a lot of crop diversity that goes on for a lot of it. There's a lot of the same food that's growing. I mean, actually, when you think about it, there's technically like 30,000 edible plant species on this planet. We only eat 150. You think about all the potential animals and fish we could eat. We don't. What do we've got? So I mean, it's even in terms of diversity of maize and products, rice, wheat, maize, right? That's it. So why are we only using those same plants when there's so many other plants? And there's a problem. What happens when you keep using those same plants and over is that crop diversity and the strength of it, it puts it at risk, which is why we're about to have that banana apocalypse. I don't know if you've heard about that. But the Cavendish banana, which has been the go-to banana for many years, decades, is in trouble. We've got to save the Cavendish, y'all. Because it looks like with this banana apocalypse, there's going to be a better word for that coming out. We'll work on it. But the banana clip's coming out. It sounds like a band or something you put in your hair that has bananas on it. This banana clips. whatever's going to happen, the big banana problem we're going to have is going to affect us in other ones, and it's going to affect rice and wheat. And it just becomes with the crop diversity. If you don't have enough crop diversity and you're reliant on the one strain of it, eventually something is going to find a way to take that strain down. And that's what we're having now. When you look at, too, the amount of meats we have, our choices are pig, cow, chicken. Like, yeah, sometimes some deer, but we've just decided those are the animals that we're just going to go on. And there's really shown that there's been no real diversity in terms of the food and in terms of what kind of, where we're getting our food from, and what the stocks of it all. It's even worse when it comes to fish. And when you look at fishing, I mean, 30% of fish is overfished. You're talking the halibuts, the cods, the big fish like that. Demand has tripled since 1974 for fish. And now the oceans, you just look at the commercial fisheries. Most fisheries out there are commercial fisheries, and you've got the commercial fisheries just dominating, pushing away even the smaller fishing industries. There's a lot of big problems that come with fishing, and I don't really eat as much fish. Like farm fish anymore, we have a lot of salmon. I don't eat it just because I don't like the mites and shit, and the real weakness of the diversity of the species. This whole farming of it doesn't seem to be working. The other big problem that we have is obviously with mass fishing, right? There's these big industrial trawlers with their big-ass nets. What they do with their big-ass nets, essentially, is they leave them in the ocean. And so what you have is you have all these massive nets that are just sitting. There's something like 4 of the countries in the world that are responsible for 80% of the pollution. Looking at you, Indonesia. But the mass fishing and the big fishing companies that are just leaving these nets out there, it's terrifying. And it's scary to think that what damage that we're doing to the ocean by leaving these out. There's no real concerted effort. Everyone's like, let's save this. How about getting rid of the fish nets, Are you gay fish? Yeah, South Park. I just said fish nets and it sounded funny. Fish sticks. But the idea is that we need to start cleaning this crap up because there's no onus. You can't just, there's a net in the ocean. There's no tagging. There's no one that says property of Jimmy Lombardo. Hey, it's Jimmy's net. We got to go get Jimmy. He's got to pay for this fishing net crap that he's done. I'm going to take a little sip from this. On the rant now. Got the rose-colored glasses. Still. Ooh. The other part, of course, the big part of the fishing is what we call bycatch. And you're like, is that fish like other fish? No, bycatch. Bycatch is just the accidental catching of... So say you want to catch cod, right? But you catch dolphins. Bycatch. Now, 40% of all trawling nets is bycatch. And what happens is we're killing a lot of these species that, just happens to be in the ocean that day. The idea that a company can just put a net and just scoop as many damn fish out as they want is really horrible. And we need to do more to protect the waters, enforce international fishing rights, make sure that the bad players aren't doing it. And maybe we just need like a fish apocalypse. Maybe we need like a fish poisoning. It sounds horrible, but we need something that we're like, you know what? Let's leave it alone for a bit. Also, octopus. I've mentioned this before. I do not believe that octopus originated on this planet. There's something about them. There's something about the cephalopods. But when I was in Cyprus once, and I remember the fishermen would catch the octopus, and to get the ink out, they would beat them against the rocks. And even as the farmer, I was just like, "Wah." Like I could feel the pain of these octopi as they're just being smashed against the rocks, just so you can get the stuff out. Man, don't be smashing the octopus. There's going to be an alien species that comes down and is like, you know what? You've been eating all our Jerry's. We call them Jerry's. You're not supposed to eat the Jerry's. Jerry's are here to help you. You ate the Jerry's. You're not supposed to do that. Of course, there's food, you fat fucks out there. There's a lot of people who comes with laziness with food, people that comfort eat. I don't know. Again, I don't have a problem with food in terms of that. My main problem with food is the food waste that we have. When you think about it, 1.3 billion tons of food is wasted every year. 1/3 of all food is wasted. 1/3. 1/3 is wasted. Not to mention, when you have it, and it goes at every stage of production. It's really crazy, though, too, because when it happens at different levels. In the developed world, the waste mostly happens at the consumer level, which is you and I getting it. We've got too many. Tossy, fill up the garbage. Whereas in underdeveloped countries, most of the food waste comes from production and storage. So it comes through the food waste is making and they're not putting it right, or just improper storage of it where it all has to get tossed, or making food that makes people sick and having to throw it out. The fact is that we need to get over this whole food waste thing. And, I was never one that ate, and my parents never forced me to everything on my plate. But they also said, don't put anything on your plate that you're not going to eat. So the idea, to me, the idea of buffets is just an insane, grotesque flaunting of food. You live, because how much food gets tossed at a buffet every day? And then you have stores, particularly in North America, not so much here in Europe, that would stop homeless people from going into their dumpsters because they were going to throw that food out. And the fact that there are restaurants and places that would throw that food out, rather throw it out than give it to someone or find a way to reuse it, there should be punishments for that. So what do we do? Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. I think we got to eat less. I think we need to discover, there should be more of an impetus on governments and maybe and media to put out there and go, hey, what kind of food is there? Let's find some new food. Instead of creating these goddamn cake shows, and the food networks are just as responsible for this. Because a lot of the crap shows that they put out there, it's all about excess. Find me a Food Network show or anything on the Cooking Channel that's actually about taking food waste responsibly or finding new ways. They don't do that. They don't. So what I'm saying to you folks is eat better, because we're wasting $1 trillion worth a year worth of food. $1 trillion. It's just crazy. And considering the price of eggs, that's like 2 eggs. Hey. So I move on to the next topic now. Oh, it's time for a gingy sippy. 3.0. That's what I'm talking about. 3.0. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? When I talk about 3.0, it is a term sort of being bantered in technology, has been used for the past little bit. Now, if you might not recognize, so I want to go to humanity 3.0. Right now with technology, we're looking at technology, hoping to go to 3.0. And when we talk about a 3.0 internet, we're talking about a decentralized internet, usually powered peer-to-peer with blockchain, so allowing to control, a bit more control over it. The problem that we have now with the internet and the way that we are in Web 2.0. Web 2.0 is why Google and Facebook, Meta, and all those guys are raping us every day. Because we created an internet that allowed them, and it was a corporate streamed internet that allowed them to basically manipulate control, but also manipulate control of our data. And as a result of which, data privacy is even worse in 2.0. But also people don't trust these companies. These companies are dicks. Literally, I've worked with some of them. They are some of the worst people on the planet. They are horrible people and horrible companies. And I think once we do get into Web 3.0, there's going to be a lot of charges. There will be lot of charges against just the lies. I mean, Meta, I know, lies and flaunts and breaks the law so many different ways. I've caught them on it. I've had to report them on it. And Amazon as well. So a lot of people, when they think about the internet, it's like, can we have an internet without those assholes? And the answer is yes, we can have it. The idea being with a decentralized internet, because now everything's centralized, right? Everything comes in, and as a result, it all flows usually the same way. A decentralized internet allows us to connect to each other easier. It allows for more data privacy, but it also allows for more communication without having any corporate interference. And I think a lot of us like that. The whole idea, too, is that when you have, it's these tech barons right now that we have a problem with, because these tech barons are controlling all the media. And so that's why we have a lot of scams. That's why this whole internet right now has been exacerbating the wealth divide. because these tech companies are using this Wall Street modeling to come in here to gouge and take away some of the smaller companies. And that's why you just see like this rise of the super tech companies. Because what's happening is someone creates a great, say, an app for AI or something like that, and it's just Meta and Amazon just sit there waiting, go, we'll buy it and put it into our thing and get rid of you. And the idea with the decentralized internet, we don't have that. It's more of a thinking globally, acting locally idea where the technology itself can facilitate. And a lot of people that are really tech people that are 3.0 are like, you sound like a stupid nerd. Well, I'm trying to explain it to people. And I don't know as much anyway, but I know it's good. When you start looking at things like data breaches where there's 4.5 billion people affected yearly, which is kind of crazy. The other problem that you have is with traditional web that we have now is it's very difficult for remote areas or areas or communities to really work as communities because you are having to jump onto the major internet that is, sort of has its own speeds, its own points of entry. And so the idea of a decentralized internet, not only would blockchain work to be able to facilitate transactions a lot easier, but it would also allow more security and more of a community. Because you can then create local sort of networks and areas within 3.0 that are part of a greater whole, but also smaller and can focus. It also, open source innovation is something that we really need because that's something that's really been crushed. Adobe, I hate you for that. But open source innovation is the idea that where someone like a Linux kind of thing, which is now on 90% of computers, in that the idea is if I create an app, then I can open source that. So instead of me going, this is my app, you can't have it, I go, actually, you know what? Here's what I created. Hoping everyone here can maybe fix it, do something, and share it. Because that way everyone learns, and it's easier for people to learn from this. When you have these cyber attacks that keep coming through on people, or DDoS attacks, which you have them, you don't have as many of these because you have a big network that you can basically target and passwords and everything. It's like a smaller network. It's like trying to rob a shopping mall versus trying to rob an apartment building. You have to go to all the different apartments to get in there. Whereas a shopping mall, you can just go and take everything, crash a truck into it. The problem is also because we've got AI, and what we're starting to see is that when you have these large language learning models, the corporate big companies are going to create an AI that has a centralized bias, right? It's going to have a bias towards them, which is why we have a lot of these woke AIs that are sort of like the Adobe one, which is just horrible, and some of the Google ones, they're actually creating hate crimes. But the idea is that you're trying to make an AI conform to ethical standards that are set by a corporation. And how do you define those? Because a corporation go, yeah, it's we love you to love everyone, but mostly we want you to buy. So if you're starting putting that bias into it, it really changes the way an AI, because literally the AI is going to work for the overlords as opposed to everyone else. I think to me the big thing that I really am passionate about the 3.0 of it all is the idea of balancing the inequality, because we all know the inequality is coming. And the idea of a 3.0 is basically having our own internet. It's also a way that we can actually find out who these billionaires are and start to get them. Because a lot of these big companies and billionaires are protected by the matrix that they built themselves and is fueled by their corporate structure. So the idea being that we can get that wealth divide. I mean, when you have 1% of people owning 45% of global wealth, all the world, and then you have 50% of the people owning less than 1% of global wealth. Well, how fair is that? If aliens were watching us right now and they were like, hey, humans, how you doing? Well, you still haven't figured it out. You still haven't learned to share. And in fact, we've gotten worse with learning to share. Greed, 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 greed. You also have the other ideas, too, that there are 1.4 billion people that don't have access to banking, that don't have access to the financial structure. So if the banks are doing so well in the world, why aren't they sharing? And so the idea also with a decentralized platform like this is with cryptocurrency, which obviously can work in remote areas or could work in small communities, is that we could use crypto-based blockchain in areas to help communities thrive and not put them under the same pressure that they have to in our big four tech central culture. The monopolies have gotten worse. I don't know if since the 1990s, 70% of all industries in America have become more concentrated. 76%. So monopolies are going, and it's not just in America it's happening because they're expanding themselves worldwide. So think about it. Since the 90s, and as I said, 90s best generation. But since then, what we've seen is the greed, the gobbly. And you would think since the financial crises of 2008, hey, maybe they're going to fix these. They're not. So we still have these problems that are going on here. And the fact that we're not sharing and that this wealth divide and the internet has become even worse for it. So this greed has culminated in these big tech companies taking over the internet, having all of this greed, monopolies, and what happens? Well, it's higher costs, higher prices, because everything that comes as a result of fewer people having to play, we have to feel it. So when the good thing about having a good size economy and having variance is that if we do get dealt a crushing blow, usually it can be softened by other ones. When you don't, when you have so much a concentration, you can't weather a bad storm. You can't survive something like that. So what we need to start looking at is creating something, and this 3.0 of an economy will hopefully shut out a lot of these corporations. We need to create a freedom of information where we can share, where we can talk without having bias, where we don't have to have corporations and algorithms sort of going, hey, thinking about suing Meta, huh? Well, fuck you. We want to be able to have something that allows people to chat. I mean, it used to be like things like Reddit or Telegram or WhatsApp, but the companies want those. They're like, well, but they're on there talking all privately. People are talking privately. We can't have that. We want those conversations because we want to sell them things. This whole garbage. I mean, in America, they have that thing called corporate lobbying. We don't have as many lobbyists, but there are companies that do affect. I mean, as of 2022, there was 3.7. Corporate lobbying was worth like 3.75 billion. So that's how important it is for companies to go to talk to your elected officials to make sure that they don't do what they're supposed to do, which is take care of the people. They want to take care of the companies. And you can see that. Well, you can see that what was happening with Disney, with DeSantis and all of that. I think what you have to start looking at as well is that when this 3.0, we are having to get to this point with this wealth divide. Are we having to look at a UBI, a universal basic income? Because with decentralized economic models, this is possible. That we could literally say, everyone in this certain amount, you get X amount of coins per month, which covers covers your basic needs. And that's part of having a decentralized internet, is we can able to break down that not everything is working at once. It's something for governments to look at too, is because if everything goes into the same coffers, maybe you're losing out going into a massive fund. I know my council here, they have one email address. You're definitely losing money. You can see it. I know someone who hacked into the council, not me, but was able to just see how inefficient it was. And this inefficiency goes across everything. Then comes the idea of 3.0 in terms of our energy, right? Because that's another thing, energy providing. When you start looking at, microgrids have contributed like 25% of energy. The reliance on one major grid is detrimental effects to all of us. In America, you can see it. Canada, it's a monopoly. You only have a choice of a certain amount of power companies. But the whole problem with when you have this sort of circular economy that sort of keeps going around, the power is always going to be very expensive. And there needs to be a way that we can hold the power companies to a responsibility for what they do. A responsibility for the costs that because just like anything else, they are gouging on each other. They're eating up each other and gobbling each other up and going, hey, nummy, more power, and then passing it on to us. Even here in England, we've had Thames Water, which continues to go into debt, but the debt is mostly based on giving their shareholders money. So they're like, yeah, we know we got to fix it. We got to pay these old men first. And you sort of go, this is garbage. This whole idea of just feeding and fostering shareholders while everyone else doesn't have enough to eat. This is part of the 3.0, is that we need to use this technology to break it up. Because let's be honest, billionaires, a lot of the people, like not Elon Musk, but the ones that aren't doing technology are relying on us. They want your brain. They wait for someone smart to do something. Oh, okay, we'll make money off that. What we need to do is start cutting them out of it and go, yeah, you don't get a part of this. You don't get to share this. You can't use this for your company, because they're just fueling themselves and powering themselves up by just buying up and gobbling everything up. And eventually government has to say, yeah, no, you can't do this anymore. Leave these companies alone. This is your industry. For a while we used to have the big automobile companies used to run it. Back in the 80s, General Motors, Ford, they were the biggest companies in the world. Not so much now. And that's because life changes. Things become important to certain people and they don't become important to someone else. The idea of sovereignty, to me, is an important one, especially digital sovereignty. That the ability to insulate ourselves from some of the bad things that can happen, but also the ability that we as people, the governments have been failing us. Governments have been failing us because they have not tackled the wealth divide. In fact, the wealth divide has gotten worse under every government worldwide. So there has to be an onus of responsibility for this. You were brought in, elected to make it easier to share, and the past you haven't, which is the reason to 3.0 these political parties. Why do we need them here? This also needs to be changed. Politics is not representative. We need to 3.0 that as well. Have a more representative. And again, it comes down to local stock markets, creating things, again, where we need to break free of the corporate structure that we have now to be able to facilitate a new structure. And to do that, we need local stock markets. We need to create a methodology of blockchain whereby these corporations cannot get in. This is a playground, and none of you are invited. It's a whole new fun party, and screw you guys. You can't come in. To me, that's the key, and that's something we need to push. I will continue to push for Web 3.0, but it's 3.0 of humanity. I think the idea of it is that 2.0 is the web we're living in now, but 3.0 is we need to address everything we've done in the past 20 years in terms of technology, sharing, the way that media works, the way that everything has gone, and take a real hard look at the numbers and long hard look at ourselves, because mental health is going down the toilet. Everyone is angrier. People are addicted to tech. We screwed up. Somebody screwed up here and made it very addictive. And government needs to step up. If they don't, you're going to get turned over, because you're going to find a new generation, particularly the ones that are addicted to it now. We all grow up and we all tone, and someone's eventually going to come back and go, you know what? Someone should pay for screwing me up, because I was addicted to a phone and none of you did anything about it. And it was all you crackheads creating these cracky programs. I don't know if that's it. Ranting. I've just been ranting. So, look, that's it for this episode. 3.0, all right? Let's think about humanity 3.0. Let's think about how we redress what happened over the past 2 decades and how we were able to apply this to technology, to society, to the finance, to energy, to everything. How do we impart the lessons of technology to create a more decentralized, more local communities? Remember the local news? Remember when you used to watch local news? That's what it should be. And I know I sound nostalgic and old, but that nostalgia is what happens and fuels. We need to get back to it, because smaller communities bring better people together, and also a lot less mental health problems when you can talk to your neighbor. Talk to your neighbor. Hug someone. Be nice to somebody. Be lovely to everyone. I love you all, even if no one's listening. Doesn't matter. I'll keep doing it, because that's what heroes do.